Well, seeing as how this is my all-time favorite fantasy world, this series is long overdue. So I'm taking the leap. In the build-up to Secrets of Dumbledore hitting theaters this April, let's talk about every single Harry Potter / Wizarding World film. There's only one place to start a series like this. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you're from. It hit cinemas Thanksgiving weekend back in 2001. It was directed by Chris Columbus, who brought you the first two Home Alone films. And y'all know how big this cast was. It stars the likes of Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, Alan Rickman, Richard Harris, Maggie Smith. You don't need me to list them all off. You know who's in this. And young Daniel Radcliffe plays Harry Potter, a boy who learns on his 11th birthday that he's the boy who lived, the orphaned son of two powerful wizards, and possesses unique magical powers of his own. And he's summoned from his life as an unwanted child to become a student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And there he meets several friends who become his closest allies, and they help him discover the truth about his parents' mysterious deaths at the hands of the Dark Lord Voldemort, he who must not be named. Now, you guys know that I gush hard about the Marvel Cinematic Universe on this channel all the freaking time, but the one film series that I fully credit with putting my geekiness on full blast, it's the Harry Potter series. And I have so much love and adoration for this magical universe for many different reasons. The characters, who we'll all get to, I'm sure, but just also the environments, the settings, the Quidditch matches. It's such a cool sport. And honestly, for lack of a better phrase, Harry Potter is just pure cinema magic. And as I've alluded to, the big reason why I was so laser hooked into this movie from the start is the world. There are just so many cool things about this film that I really want to be real. Like shopping for wands in Diagon Alley in a great scene featuring the late John Hurt as Ollivander. Wizard chess seems like such a cool hobby to have. The Mirror of Erised being discovered and showing the user its deepest desires. The clue is in the name right there, guys. Erised literally is desire spelled backwards. And in general, just Hogwarts. This is a school I would love to go to, learn all these incantations and make potions and what have you. It just makes you feel so welcome from the onset in that beautifully directed shot of the boats drifting up to the castle for the first time. And John Williams' phenomenal score behind it is just the icing on the cake. That one little moment where the kids are on the boats and Hagrid is leading the way up to the castle and the camera pans up to the castle for the very first time. Ooh, I get chills just thinking about it. It just takes me back to what transfixed me about it in the first place. Not just because the school looks neat, but what other school in the world offers flying lessons in place of physical education? I wanted that. Now, one thing that they got absolutely spot on with all of these movies is the casting. And this first movie, the casting was especially important, namely for our three leads, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. We luckily were graced with young Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter here, which almost didn't happen because his parents didn't want him on set all the time. Could you imagine how drastically different this series would have felt if this wasn't Daniel Radcliffe? But he was purely excellent in this movie, along with Rupert Grint and Emma Watson. These three kids are just so awesome together. These are all among my favorite child performances ever. It's not just because we get to see all three of them grow up before our very eyes, but their camaraderie and their teamwork, especially going into the big finale of this first film, it's just so amazing to see on a rewatch. That whole finale really does give us the biggest strengths of these characters, and they really use them to their advantage to get them out of these situations. Hermione with her book smarts and paying attention in class, escaping the devil's snare. Harry and his athletic prowess catching the key on the broomstick, and Ron Weasley, my dude, the geek of the group and navigating that gigantic chessboard, probably my favorite scene in the entire movie if you ask me. Sacrificing himself also Harry can move on and go face to face with Professor Quirrell in front of that famous Mirror of Erised, and Professor Quirrell has a little bit of a parasite growing on him. I'll just leave it at that for right now. But it's magnificent. These three kids work together so incredibly well, not to mention the comedy between them, pretty underrated.
Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
I mean, Ron has a point. I mean, all these cast members are just excellent. Robbie Coltrane is a huge standout as Hagrid. He is just so lovable here. There are so many moments with him where you just want to tear up and cry, especially towards the end of both of these Columbus movies, which I'll get to in the next review. Maggie Smith as Professor Mcgonagall, I think, is the character who exudes the most welcoming of tones from all the faculty. She just has that warmth in her voice the whole way through this series. She was excellent casting as well, and a great performance. Very interesting character, because Mcgonagall is delightful, but she can be very stern as well. Keep in mind, she's the one who's taking points away from her own children as the head of Gryffindor House. Really teaching those kids lessons. It's almost like if you aged Mary Poppins by at least 30 years and she could be a shapeshifter. That's Professor Mcgonagall in a nutshell. And the late Richard Harris as Albus Dumbledore gives quite an enigmatic performance. There is just something so regal about him here, yet also very mysterious as displayed in that opening scene with Professor McGonagall on Privet Drive itself. It's almost like he knows what's going to happen before everybody else knows it's going to happen, like he's Nostradamus. Not only is he the wisest person in the room, but also very quirky with little moments like this.
Alas. Earwax.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you get Severus Snape, the potion's master. Of course, played by the late, great Alan Rickman with such a slimy mystique about him. But then with hindsight, when you know where this series is going, it makes all the more sense why he is the way he is on a rewatch. So even though obviously I'm Gryffindor through and through, Professor Snape actually might be the most interesting character in my eyes, and rest in peace, Alan Rickman, this is probably one of your best roles ever. Speaking of slimeballs, how about Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy, huh? God, this kid was the worst in Sorcerer's Stone, wasn't he? As a kid, one of the biggest highlights of these movies for me was seeing Malfoy get his comeuppance every single time in different ways. And that's just because of how much I loathed Draco. Here, after tattling on our leads for being up past curfew, he spends detention with Harry in the Forbidden Forest, and he is just the biggest crybaby coward you will ever see. Now, Tom Felton is fantastic throughout this whole series, as we'll talk about, because he's maybe the most underrated actor out of everybody they got here, but especially in Sorcerer's Stone, he shines with the moments he gets. Now, as much nostalgia as I have with Sorcerer's Stone, this is not a perfect movie by any stretch. I actually think the structuring of it seems rather clunky to me on a rewatch. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very investing story, and it just welcomes you into this world in the most grandiose way, but you can't help but notice that there is loads of exposition waiting for you with this one. Obviously, this is much needed exposition just because of how big of a world this is, but on a rewatch of Sorcerer's Stone by itself, it really doesn't, I don't know how to put this. The movie does have a tendency to meander a little bit, especially throughout that first half when Harry is in Diagon Alley with Hagrid. The constant questions of what's this? Who are these people? Where do you do this? I still need a wand. Then Hagrid in turn going, here's where you do this, Harry, and then there's those people, Harry. Don't trust the goblins. It does get a teensy bit repetitive if you look at it constructively. And even though the practical effects in this movie are staggering, the goblins in Gringotts Bank, I'm always fully convinced are these real stingy, sneaky characters that were actually made on set. The CGI effects do feel admittedly a bit dated, and the Quidditch match, even though fun and easy enough to understand, as Oliver Wood would say, there's a fair amount of Matrix moments where the players flying around don't look as real as they could be. So even though this is not my personal favorite Harry Potter movie that we'll be talking about, I do enjoy myself every time I revisit this movie. It does have a lot of wondrous magical moments that you would come to expect, and it does set a very, very dark tone for future installments of Harry Potter. And even though technically your main villain of the franchise, Voldemort, is barely in this film, it does set up a great amount of conflict between good and evil here. I've seen Sorcerer's Stone so many times throughout my life, and this will certainly not be the last time I look at it. I'm gonna give Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone an A-. Now, despite the movie's obvious flaws, there is no denying the impact that this and the film series that followed it had on the fantasy genre. The impact it made on so many childhoods, myself included, going into the new millennium, unmatched still to this very day. I have to do a Harry Potter marathon at least twice a year. This is the movie that always kickstarts it because, let's face it, you have to do it in order. But it does its job and it makes you excited for what comes next. Speaking of what comes next, stay tuned. Very soon I'm going to be uploading my review for Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, also directed by Chris Columbus. If you guys enjoyed what you saw today, do consider smashing that subscribe button as hard as you possibly can, as well as that notification bell right next to it. That way you don't miss any future uploads from me going forward. This channel is very, very close to 1,000 subscribers, and let's go ahead and push that number up a little bit, shall we? And don't forget to smash that thumbs up button on your way out if you enjoyed what you saw today. Let me know down in the comments section below what's your favorite Harry Potter movie is. What are your memories with Sorcerer's Stone? And I'm also curious, what house do you belong to? Obviously, I've got to represent that shit. But guys, y'all are the best. Again, I cannot thank you guys enough for your support up to this point. Stay tuned for more exciting content hitting this channel very, very soon. Like I said, I'll be continuing this series with Chamber of Secrets hitting the channel before you know it. But y'all are the best. Again, thank you all so much for watching today. With all that being said, back talk, commence.